a disturbing audio that a lot of people have heard on TikTok.
Which one? I hate this sound.
That audio is actually from a video game, Half-Life. I don't know if you've heard about this before.
No.
So in the actual video game, it's basically like about zombies and how there's a parasite that gets stuck on your head, and that the person who, the host, the human, is still alive and conscious, and they're slowly getting corrupted and slowly getting mutated. And they're screaming.
They're talking backwards?
No, they're screaming perfectly fine, but the audio that everybody knows is the reversed version.
I heard this audio too, though. Alright, bro.
So that's the disturbing sound that we all know.
I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty cool, like, it's I hate that sound, but it's pretty cool, concept.
One day, a hibachi chef decided to spice up his routine by trying out a new trick, tossing a razor-sharp knife high into the air for dramatic effect. But instead of landing safely in his hand, the blade sliced clean through a support rope hanging above the grill. Unfortunately, that rope was holding up a massive decorative Buddha head mounted on the wall behind him. In an instant, the heavy statue came crashing down. The chef barely had time to react before the head slammed into him, pinning his face directly against the scorching hot hibachi grill. Trapped and unable to move, he suffered severe and devastating facial burns. He laid pinned on the grill, experiencing some of the worst pain a human being can ever feel, his face burning away by the second. By the time help arrived, it was way too late. The chef died from fatal thermal injuries, a fury end to a reckless display of showmanship and bad timing. Could you imagine being the family eating dinner at this hibachi restaurant? One minute you're having your food cooked in front of you, and the next minute a human being is being cooked in front of you.
It always shocks me, the crazy things people do for love, but it's even more shocking when it's famous teenage influencers. 17-year-old Marianne Gonzaga from Cancun in Mexico is a glamorous influencer with over 160k followers. She'd actually been dating another teenager, Jose, for roughly 2 years, and the pair were very serious despite their young age. They were so serious, in fact, that they actually got pregnant together and gave birth to a child. Marianne gave birth to this adorable little baby girl, but sadly the pair broke up. Marianne was no stranger to controversy despite her young age. In October 2024, she was called out online for lying about buying a luxury home. She had posted a video tour of this luxurious beach house and said it was a tour of her new property, only for the actual owner to come out and say, no, that's not your property, that's my property. But obviously the latest controversy is far worse. After having the baby together, the teen lovers broke up, and Marianne was understandably heartbroken by this. She was kind of posting TikToks with just her and her baby and almost posting this single mum content. And she came across like a really sweet girl, just trying to do what was best for her and her daughter. Then things got very, very messy. It's believed she ended up traveling to Mexico City in February 2025 to visit the ex-boyfriend. It was there that she found him with another woman. This was Valentine Gilbert, another beautiful young influencer with an online following. And it's believed the two females even knew each other prior to this, and some had even said they were good friends. So when Marianne found out she was dating her ex-boyfriend, it's reported that the pair got into a very heated confrontation. Police report that Valentine was brutally assaulted by the young mother. It's believed that she went to her apartment and repeatedly stabbed her, causing an absolute bloodbath. Now, by some miracle, Valentine was actually hanging on to life, and after being rushed to hospital, she underwent life-saving surgery. Police arrested Marianne at the scene, and thankfully, Valentine survived.
Cum-filled cupcakes were served to children by this teacher in Louisiana. Meet Cynthia Perkins, and let me warn you, this story is incredibly disturbing. So back in 2019, investigators were tipped off about this woman, Cynthia, and her husband, Dennis. Apparently, some images had surfaced depicting the couple graping a child. And when investigators finally swept in October of 2019 and arrested the couple, what they found out was disturbing. Cynthia, who at the time of her arrest was a middle school English teacher, had allegedly gotten a sperm sample from her husband, baked that sperm into some cupcakes, and brought the cupcakes into her classroom, where she then served those baked goods to her own students. When the police raided the couple's home, they found hidden cameras in the bathrooms and in the attic, and they uncovered a lot of evidence that the couple had been producing child pornography, with a victim under the age of 13 years old. Cynthia at first was unrepentant and tried to pin this all on her husband, but shortly after they were arrested, she divorced her husband and admitted that she had, yes, taken part in this entire thing, and just last year she was sentenced to over 40 years of prison time. Now, her husband Dennis was actually a sheriff's deputy, and in a completely unrelated case, another woman was found guilty of helping Dennis grape, a woman who was completely unconscious. And yes, they filmed the attack. So these two were serial predators and offenders. And this story just goes to show that these people don't look evil. Predators come in all shapes and sizes, even teachers and cops.
This is Taylor Casey. She went missing just last week during a summer yoga retreat in the Bahamas. More people should be talking about this. So Taylor's from Chicago and she's been a yoga practitioner for 15 years. Taylor joined the Sivananda Ashram yoga retreat, which hosted the trip on Paradise Island in the Bahamas. The retreat hosts dozens of programs and vacations throughout the year. Taylor loves yoga and was actually participating in the ashram's certification program. And she was so excited to go on this retreat to fulfill a long-term goal of deepening her practice. While on the retreat, Taylor kept in good contact with her friends and family like usual, and she said she was so excited to tell them all about her trip once she got back. She texted her mom on June 18th a photo of the beach and said, quote, "I miss you, Mom. Look, I'm at the beach." End quote. That was the last time her mom heard from her. Taylor was officially last seen at the yoga retreat the evening of June 19th, and after this, she completely vanished. When she didn't show up to the yoga classes the next morning, the organizers of the retreat reported her missing to the Royal Bahamas Police Force. They also notified the American Embassy. A short while later, Taylor's mom received a phone call from the retreat organizer. Taylor's mom was taken aback as the woman said, quote, "Have you heard from Taylor? She hasn't shown up for yoga classes." End quote. This is how she found out that her daughter was missing. Authorities have since searched the retreat and the surrounding areas, and they're combing through CCTV footage for any clues. They've interviewed members at the retreat and have brought in drones, search and rescue dogs, and divers, and at first they didn't find anything. But 1 week after disappearing, Taylor's phone was found at the bottom of the ocean. This makes sense because Taylor's niece was the only person who had access to her location because of the Find My iPhone app, and according to her family, her phone last pinged in the water. Authorities so far have only stated that her phone was found at the bottom of the ocean, but it's not clear how far away it was from the retreat. The rest of Taylor's belongings were found back at the retreat. Police haven't mentioned whether or not they think foul play is suspected, but her family believes that she is in danger. They say that she would never disappear like this. Her mom has since traveled to the Bahamas to help with the search. It's come to light that people at the retreat are concerned about how this is being handled. It's taken 8 days for this to really get any traction, and people are upset at the retreat for only making a statement about this 3 days ago. You would think that something would have been said the day she went missing to get as many eyes on this case as possible. A lot of people have also pointed out how similar Taylor's case is to Nancy Ings, who also disappeared during a yoga retreat in Guatemala last October. There are a lot of similarities in these two cases, and Nancy is still missing. It's now been over a week with no sign of Taylor. If you have any information about this case, please contact the number on the screen.
Follow our voices and the lights.
Cross-out eyes like a dead person.
There's so many secret passages in here, secret passages everywhere. I don't even know where that leads to. If ghosts like to go back to their glory years, this would be it. Lots of other people have seen full apparition as well as noises and such. A lot of shadow figures on this floor. Yeah, some of the coats are still even in here if you look.
Oh.
This guy, back to his glory days, came back out back and shot himself out back. And he does appear.
Please be careful here. He scares me evil.
Wow.
There it comes again.
Holy shit.
Oh, what was that? Oh. Is there anybody here in the school with us?
Let us know you're here.
Hey, we see you down there. There's a headless doll. The head's missing.
You will see and hear stuff. Now, what's that mean? I don't know.
A man was rushed to the hospital after falling asleep with a lit cigarette. The fire engulfed his bed and severely burned his body, leaving him with third-degree burns across much of his skin. Doctors managed to save him, but just barely. He was bandaged from head to toe in layers of gauze soaked in medicinal ointment, flammable but necessary for healing. For the next 3 weeks, he lay in recovery, immobilized and agitated. He was a heavy smoker and the cravings clawed at him. Desperate for a fix, he eventually bribed a nurse to wheel him outside for just a few minutes. But, unknown to the nurse, he had hidden a cigarette and a lighter in his gown. Once alone, he lit the cigarette, but as he took a drag, the ashes dropped and caught the edge of his ointment-soaked bandages. In seconds, the fire spread across his body like a fuse. He screamed, swatted at the flames, but his limited movement and the layers of gauze only made it worse. Panic-stricken, he rocked back and forth, accidentally sending his wheelchair rolling down a nearby ramp. At the bottom sat his oxygen tank. When the flames reached it, the tank exploded with a violent force, engulfing him in a fireball. The man, once a survivor of fire, had tragically become its victim once again, this time fatally.
Growing up, she was part of one of the most darkest cults, the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints.
This woman from St. George, Utah tells all about growing up in a polygamist family.
While living in a polygamous community, did you know of any underage girls who were married to adult men?
Yeah. That answer is true.
Do you think your father was wrong to set you up on a date with a 73-year-old man when you were a teenager?
You kind of see what kind of questions they're asking her, right? And
yeah. Bro, and they're already pretty disturbing. I mean, it's a lot of
shit. With all these questions, it's revealed that this cult practiced polygamy, but it wasn't in a normal polyamorous way. They took advantage of these kids where they were forced into marriages with older men. The more wives you have, no matter what age, and the more they have kids, you have a higher chance of getting a spot in heaven.
Did they get in trouble after this video? Like, did anybody get persecuted or...
That's what this whole thing is about. Nothing happened to the dad, but that's when they ask her the final 21st question.
For $500,000, do you believe your father, as an adult, has ever had sexual relations with a minor?
Yes. That answer is true.
Just fast forward a little bit more, just so you're the dad's explanation.
I'm not sure when I did this, I knew what a minor was. That was a long time ago.
Okay.
Wife number...
This has to be every parent's worst nightmare. You let your child out of your sight for 2 minutes, they're spotted with a creepy man and then vanish into thin air. It was the 9th of June 1995 in Arkansas. I feel like I'm doing loads of Arkansas cases lately. It's not intentional, it just happens to be that a lot of people go missing there apparently. Morgan Nick was a lovely, sweet little 6-year-old girl living in the area. It was a little ray of sunshine. As you can see, she just got the most adorable little face. She was very sweet and friendly, and other kids were just kind of drawn to her. On the day in question, Morgan and her mum, Colleen, went to a Little League baseball game in Alma. At roughly 10:30 p.m. that night, some kids came over and asked Morgan if she wanted to go and catch fireflies with them. Now, this seemed like a pretty innocent activity, but her mum was like, it's a bit late, we're going to go home in a second. But Morgan was like, please, just for a couple of minutes, so her mum was like, fine. She was last spotted by friends at 10:45 p.m. They said she was kind of adjusting her shoes briefly by her mum's car and then seemingly vanished. Disturbingly, they'd also seen a creepy looking man say something to her at a similar time. The game finished and Morgan's mum went back to the car, obviously expecting to see her daughter, but she was gone and she never saw her again. Obviously, everyone that evening stayed behind hunting high and low for this missing little girl, and the police soon were involved. They took a description of this apparent creepy man from the people who saw him, and a police sketch was released to the public. They did also appeal to the public to share any kind of video footage that they'd taken that night, and obviously this was way back in the day before like camera phones and things, but people did still have like camcorders and would record at events like this. They did identify a red truck from some footage, but this lead kind of led nowhere for a little bit. That was until a few months later. Police secretly focused in on a man called Billy Jack Lynx, and it transpired that he drove a red truck that was seen at the game that night. There was also some kind of blood evidence inside that van when the police searched, but I think frustratingly, due to a lack of technology back in those days, this was never identified as definitely Morgan's. They were apparently unable to really kind of test it very thoroughly. This man had also tried to snatch another little girl from the local area just 2 months after Morgan vanished. This is what really put him on the police radar, and this happened just 10 minutes away from where Morgan disappeared from. He was convicted of indecency for that crime and was questioned about Morgan, but just denied all knowledge. He was in prison for attempting to snatch the other girl, but frustratingly died in prison in 2000 before we knew anything about what happened to Morgan. It was only in October 2020 1994, obviously 24 years after he passed away. All those years later, police finally announced that they revisited that red truck, and a lab report, quote, strongly indicates Morgan had been inside that truck.
There's a really strange missing persons case happening right now, and I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. This is Caleb Harris. He's a 21-year-old college student who disappeared on March 4th after stepping outside of his Texas apartment to grab an Uber Eats order. The details surrounding this case are bizarre because his last moments before vanishing were documented on Snapchat. Adding to this mystery is the fact that human remains were just found in a well near his apartment, but police don't know if they even belong to Caleb. So on the evening of March 3rd, Caleb, his 2 roommates, and a mutual friend stayed up pretty late playing online video games with a former high school classmate. They all lived in an apartment on the 1900 block of Ennis Jocelyn Road near the Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. Caleb was a second-year student there. At around 12:56 a.m., a doorbell camera from a nearby apartment showed Caleb, his friend, and one roommate in the parking lot of the apartment complex playing with a puppy. The puppy belonged to the girlfriend of one of his roommates. The camera then showed them returning back into the apartment. Shortly after, the friend left and both roommates said they were going to head to bed. But Caleb said that he was going to stay up and order some snacks off of Uber Eats for his school lunch the next day. A few hours would go by, and at 2:44 a.m., Caleb sent a Snapchat to his sister that showed him walking the puppy in what appears to be the apartment complex's parking lot. At 3:03 a.m., Caleb sent another Snapchat, but this time to a friend who lives in San Antonio. It was a picture of a small bridge over a drainage ditch within a few hundred feet of the entrance to his apartment. His cell phone last pinged to the nearest cell phone tower at 3:12 a.m., and after this, he completely vanished. 10 minutes later, the Uber Eats driver delivered his order to his apartment. He left it outside near the front door per his request. Caleb's roommates woke up the next morning and found the Uber Eats order still outside in the exact same spot. They also saw that Caleb's truck was still parked right outside. His keys and wallet were still inside the apartment, but Caleb and his phone were gone. He was reported missing not long after, and police searched the entire apartment complex as well as the surrounding areas. But there wasn't a single piece of evidence found. There were no signs of a struggle and no indication that there was a hit-and-run situation. Uber made a statement saying the order was marked as completed without any reported incident, and the driver continued to make other deliveries throughout the night. It's literally as if Caleb vanished into thin air, but there could be a possible break in this case. On Monday, a city employee in Corpus Christi found human remains inside of a 40-foot deep well that's part of a sewer system. This well is located in close proximity to Caleb's apartment and the university. Authorities had a hazmat team come in who had to drain the well water and wear hazardous material suits to recover the remains. But because of the state of the remains, they have not yet been identified, and it's not clear if they belong to Caleb. They were sent off to the county medical examiner, but the Corpus Christi Police Department said that at this time, there's no evidence that the remains are connected to Caleb's disappearance. What's incredibly odd, though, is that CCPD stated that the area where the remains were found had previously been searched multiple times over by several different agencies during the search for Caleb. Caleb was described as a creature of habit, so if this is found to be him, the question of how and why he ended up there will need to be answered. His family has created a GoFundMe to help bring Caleb home, so I'll leave that here. If you have any information about this case, please contact the number on the screen.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Have you ever wondered how accurate progression photos are? Progression photos are what detectives use on people that went missing years and years ago to kind of guess what they would look like today. So I'm going to show you some photos of missing children, what their progression photo looked like, and what they actually looked like when they were found. And if you're new to my page, I do all sorts of true crime and ghost stories, so make sure you're following along. So here's the first one. Here's 2 kids that went missing when they were children. And here's what detectives guessed they would look like as they got older. But here's what they actually look like when they were found. As you can tell, like, the hair color is wrong, general face shape is kind of right. I guess on the little boy it's more accurate, but these look like pretty much completely different people. So here's another one. Here's a baby that went missing. And this is what detectives thought he might look like when he got older, and granted, it's so hard to do this on babies. As you can tell, he doesn't really look anything like what his progression photo looked like when he was eventually found, but this little girl below has some similar features to what they thought she would look like as she got older. I'm so happy that this group of kids got found, but it's also proof that you need to find kids as quickly as possible because they just start looking so different so quickly.
This tenant lived in a luxury home for a year and a half for free and insists that the landlord pay her $100,000. Elizabeth Horshron rented this stunning Airbnb guest house in LA that's worth $3.5 million but decided to overstay without paying. She says she has the right to be there, but everyone seems pretty upset about this entire situation. Elizabeth's been staying since September 2021, but the agreement was that she stay for 6 months, so instead she asked the landlord to pay her $100,000 so that she can relocate. A judge ruled that the landlord has no legal reason to evict Elizabeth from the home due to the city's rent laws, which absolutely sucks. And then Elizabeth's attorney argued that she wasn't required to pay rent because the home had never been officially approved by the city for someone to live there. And she also claimed that the shower was built without a permit. Elizabeth has made it very difficult for the landlord to enter his own house, and he even offered to pay for her hotel stay, which she declined. He called Elizabeth a tenant from hell, and he filed a lawsuit to evict her, and finally she was forced out of the home this month. So my question to you guys is, do you think Elizabeth's reasoning was valid, or is she out of her mind?
Imagine being so scared of police that you freeze to death. Brandon Bushman was a 34-year-old man living in Minnesota. On June the 26th, 2023, something horrific was revealed. Police responded to a call asking them to attend a property that hadn't been lived in since around February 2023. Just after 3:30 p.m, police found Brandon's body inside of a chest freezer in the property. Now, witnesses had seen police in the local area and spotted Brandon run from the upstairs of the house. It's believed that he had a warrant outstanding for his arrest, and it's believed he was trying to evade police. In doing so, he ran to the freezer of the property, presumably hoping to hide there for a short amount of time. However, after climbing into the basement freezer by choice, tragically due to it being an older model of freezer, it had no facility to be opened from the inside. It had a latching mechanism on the outside of the freezer only. Tragically, Brandon was trapped. He couldn't escape the freezer. He was found deceased, and the autopsy showed no evidence of him having any prior injuries or trauma to his body.
I served my customers human flesh burgers in my restaurant. My name is Joe Metney, also known as the Cannibal. I killed and dismembered about 10 women, turning them into hamburgers. It all began in 1995. I was searching for my son, whose custody had been taken away by my ex-wife a year earlier. Under a bridge in Baltimore, I encountered 2 homeless individuals who were using drugs with my ex. Enraged, I killed them with an axe. I also killed a fisherman, fearing he might be a witness, then disposed of the 3 bodies in the river nearby. A few months later, I came across 2 prostitutes. Like a butcher, I turned them into meat, which I stored in Tupperware containers placed in the freezer. The remains were buried in small graves I had dug in the woods. In the following weeks, I sold human meat hamburgers on the side of the road from a trailer. Since the taste of human flesh is very similar to that of pork, no one could tell the difference. Whenever I ran out of meat, I sought new victims among the homeless and prostitutes, luring them with promises of drugs or easy money to create my horrifying recipe of human meat. It was in 1996 that I was convicted and sentenced, and on August 5th, 2017, I died in prison.
I keep seeing a lot of online discourse about the new Netflix Jeffrey Dahmer show and if it's actually exploitative, so let's take a little deeper look. Recently, it came out that one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims' siblings learned that the show was coming out when everyone else did. Her name's Rita Isbell, and her brother was Errol Lindsay, and they use her likeness and name in the show pretty explicitly. Rita was known pretty publicly at the time for her outburst during the Jeffrey Dahmer trial, and you can see here, the show makes no bones about using her exact likeness and outburst to profit, and Rita is not partaking in any of the profit shares of this show. Personally, and this is just me, I also think the show makes a very specific choice by casting Evan Peters as Jeffrey Dahmer. Evan has a really specific online fan base of young girls who idolize the psychotic characters he plays. So it's not shocking to me that people are watching this show and tweeting insanities like this. The show is #1 on Netflix right now, meaning it's one of the most watched shows in the whole world. So I can't imagine being a victim's family member because it's everywhere. And though both Evan Peters and the show's creator Ryan Murphy have come out and said that they didn't want the show to be about Jeffrey Dahmer, they wanted it to be about the victims, there's not really a lot being done right now for the victims or their families. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments if you've seen it.
You'll never know my name, but I scared the hell out of California in the late 60s with a wave of enigmatic murders. Known as the Zodiac Killer, I was responsible for no less than 37 serial murders between the late 60s and early 70s. This nickname refers to the logo of the Zodiac watch brand, similar to the symbol I used to sign my murders, a target site in a Celtic cross. I was active in Northern California and used to attack young couples in their cars at night in isolated locations. I killed several of my victims with a pistol and coldly murdered a couple, Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, by stabbing them several times. It was a night in September 1969, the 27th to be precise. Wearing a balaclava and my fetish symbol, I approached them and threatened them with a gun. I asked Cecilia to tie up her husband, then tied him up in turn. Afterwards, I had a long talk with them, announcing that I was about to stab them, which I did, stabbing Brian 8 times and Cecilia 10 times. I then carved the following inscriptions on Brian's car door with a knife. For several years, I sent letters to the local press containing messages encrypted with strange symbols, all of which have been deciphered to date. The latest was by a French cryptologist who claims that I am Lawrence Kane, one of the known suspects in the case, now deceased. I have inspired several books and a multitude of films and TV series. Today, the mystery of my identity remains inexplicable.
An unsettling clue was discovered in the case of the missing woman and the mysterious road trip. Gwen Brunel is a 27-year-old from Idaho. She left her home on June the 26th to embark on a solo road trip and was last seen on CCTV. She told her family that she would stay in regular contact with them, but shortly after starting the road trip, her phone was shut off. Bizarrely, she told her boyfriend a story about what she planned on doing. She bought 11 show rabbits and told her boyfriend that she was going to California to meet a rabbit judge for training. She'd packed up the rabbits with enough food and water for them for about a week. However, the rabbit judge in question stated that they never heard of her and never made any plans to meet with Gwen. Gwen was spotted at a small shop just 20 miles from her home. This was on the day that she left on the road trip, and strangely, she was captured on camera wearing different clothes than the clothes she left her house in. Also strangely, as the place was just 20 miles away from her home, it took her 3 hours to get there. She was then seen the day after at a petrol station in Jordan Valley, Oregon. She then went across the road to buy some snacks and reportedly told a member of staff that she was in a hurry. The member of staff, though, then saw her sitting in her car outside for an hour. She vanished and her parents reported her missing. Disturbingly, her car was found abandoned in Malheur County, about half a mile from the highway. Her keys and possessions were still in the car along with the 11 rabbits. Tragically, 5 of the rabbits had passed away from the heat. There was a huge search in the area to try and find the missing girl, but no luck. 2 months later, though, there was a disturbing clue. Her t-shirt was found tangled in a barbed wire fence near Dog Creek. Her boots were also then recovered not far away from the t-shirt. Police say there was no sign of an abduction, but why would she leave those rabbits to die? All of her family and friends said how much she loved rabbits and that she would never leave them in harm's way. Police are encouraging anyone with any information to come forwards.
Groomed by a man more than 3 times her age, Kellyanne Bates was only 14 when she met the man that would end her life in what still remains one of the most horrific murders in the UK. Quick trigger warning, some of the details in the video are quite graphic and hard to listen to. James Patterson Smith was an extremely violent man. On the outside, he looked perfectly normal and was actually described by friends as well-groomed and house-proud. He'd been in a few relationships before meeting Kelly, but they'd all ended due to his violent temper. He'd even tried to drown 2 of his previous girlfriends. And at the age of 46, he met 14-year-old Kelly while she was babysitting for some of his friends. Their relationship was kept a secret by Kelly and James for 2 years, but at the age of 16, when she left school, she moved in with him. When Kelly's parents finally met James, they were shocked by his age, and Kelly's mum did everything she could to try and persuade Kelly to leave the relationship. As the months went on, Kelly became more and more withdrawn, and eventually all contact between her and her family stopped. On April 16, 1996, the police received a call from James saying that he'd accidentally drowned his girlfriend in the bath. When they arrived at the house, they found blood throughout the rooms and Kelly's naked body was in the bedroom. It became quite clear that this was not an accidental death. Kelly had drowned in the bath, but only after enduring up to a month of torture at the hands of James.
Kelly had over 150 injuries in total. She'd been tied up with a ligature around her neck. She had burns to her legs, a fractured arm, multiple stab wounds from knives, scissors and forks. Her hands were crushed. She had stab wounds inside her mouth. She'd been partially scalped, and she had 2 empty eye sockets. Kelly had endured all of these injuries in the weeks leading up to her death, before finally being dragged to the bathroom and drowned. James was quickly arrested, but denied murder, saying that Kelly had inflicted all these injuries on herself to make him look bad. He then changed his story and said that it was him, but that Kelly had taunted him and dared him to do it. It only took the jury 1 hour to find him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. In January 2023, he actually became eligible for parole, but it was denied and he remains behind bars.
This is one of the worst cases in human history. This is the murder of Christine Siluan. She was from the Philippines and was a volunteer in church, and she used the church every day from 4 to 6 p.m. On the day of her murder, she went to church as per her schedule, but she didn't come home after that. Her parents then started to worry and they began searching for her with their neighbors. And what they found is absolutely horrid. They found her body in a farm where half her face was sliced like a piece of pizza, and her face was literally skinned down to her skull. Also, her brain was completely destroyed by acid. The police then started investigating, and they checked the cameras and found out that she was with a guy. The people started protesting about this case, and the case was then given to special officers. They had a lot of pressure on this. A week before this happened, she broke up with her boyfriend, so the police took him into custody, and he was proving that he was at home all day when she was murdered, but officers were completely tired of this case, and they then sentenced him as the murderer. But after a few months, a thief was caught in a store where he confessed that he murdered and raped Christine. He said he started talking to her on Facebook with a fake account and was using fake photos of another guy that was pretty good looking. Christine fell for the guy, and she assumed that he was about 20 years old, and they started texting daily. One day, they both decided to meet up at 6 p.m. near the church she went to. But upon arriving, Christine noticed that this was not the guy she was talking to, and he was around 40-ish years old. She then refused to talk to him and tried to go back, but he held her hands extremely forcefully. He then took her far away from town and raped her repeatedly and put iron rods inside her personal organs. He then cut her face in half and then skinned her whole head down to the skull. And to make it even worse, he put acid inside of her head. The autopsy also revealed that her tongue, trachea, esophagus, parts of her neck, and her right ear were missing. The self-proclaimed killer of this case, named Renato Lanis, said that he used barber-type scissors and stabbed her 30 times on different parts of her body and skinned her face. Christine Siluan was only 16 years old, and this case is extremely haunting. There's a picture of her body that was found in the field, but Google did a really good job of not showing it and hiding it. So even if you do go looking for the picture, I don't think you're going to find it. This is one of those cases that after you get done reading it, you just feel some sort of uneasiness. I feel so bad for Christine's family, and I can't imagine finding my daughter in this state. May Christine Siluan rest in peace.
This is Mr. Swirl, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. And let me tell you, this story is really disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. So this is Mr. Swirlface himself, Christopher Paul Neal. He was born in Canada in 1975. So Christopher had a pretty unremarkable childhood, but it should be stated here that he wanted to become a Catholic priest. But after the seminary denied him because he wasn't properly qualified, he decided to become a teacher instead. So Christopher eventually moved out of Canada. He moved to South Korea. That's where he was employed as a teacher. And suddenly, all of these images of CP started circulating around the internet. Christopher appeared in over 200 images of CP that he produced himself. And in every photo that he produced, he always put this swirly effect over his face, thinking that it would obscure his identity. Well, eventually German computer experts were able to unswirl the image. They produced this image to the left, and a number of people who knew Christopher contacted Interpol and told them, this is that guy. So once he was identified, Christopher fled to Thailand. That's where he decided he would make his great getaway. And while he was living in Thailand, he employed the services of a young boy who would go out to local internet cafes and bring Christopher other young boys that he would abuse and take photos of. But this didn't last long and obviously didn't work out for Christopher. In the year 2007, towards the end of the year, he was finally arrested by the Thai police. There's nothing that brings me more joy than seeing all these officers around this guy. And one thing that should be noted about Christopher is his unrepentant nature when he's photographed. You'll see what I mean. Pictures like these were taken by the press when he was finally arrested and brought to justice. So in Thailand, Christopher was sentenced to 39 months in prison and he was handed a $1,700 plus fine. But he later admitted to the crime, he was eventually released, and then he returned to Canada. Upon his return to Canada, he was immediately arrested at the Vancouver International Airport. Now, while Christopher was in Canada, CP was found on his phone and laptop. He was sentenced to a number of years in prison. But in March of 2017, Christopher was released from prison, and he now lives in Vancouver somewhere, according to the internet. That's right, Mr. Swirlyface is currently out on the streets. I didn't know this. I think this is an absolute injustice to all the victims of this guy. This is absolutely a horrific story, and I cannot believe he's not serving more time for appearing in over 200 images of CP. It's crazy. But yeah, let me know below. Do you think this guy should still be in prison? I'm also going to be starting a true crime series talking about murders, conspiracies, all of the above on my YouTube channel, The Paranormal Files, so go subscribe if you don't already. But yeah, this story is unbelievable and sickening.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
This father and son were brutally murdered on camera by the cartel. Before I get started, I just want to say this is definitely the worst cartel video on the internet. The video that I'm about to explain to you was uploaded sometime in 2018. The setting of the video is in some sort of forest. The video begins with both men kneeling on the ground with their hands tied and their mouths gagged. The father and son are then questioned by their captors, and soon after the father is beaten by what looks like a 2x4 or something along the lines of a big wooden stick. And when I say beaten, I mean beaten. They are not taking it easy on him at all. Soon after this, the father is decapitated right in front of his son with a knife. The knife isn't too big, but the worst part about this whole video is his son's reaction to watching his dad get beheaded. He was crying hysterically and wailing as you would expect, but it really stuck with me because it's a different kind of crying I've never heard before. The father, who is now beheaded, is completely covered in blood and is obviously dead. His son continues to cry hysterically, but what's about to happen to him is absolutely sickening. Please never go looking for this video because what I'm about to explain is extremely disturbing. After decapitating and killing the father, they move on to the son, but they don't decapitate him. They actually begin to flay him, which is far more painful and a prolonged way to die. This is how they tortured people back in the medieval times. The killers basically take knives and just start slicing off the skin from the boy's chest down to his abdomen and completely skin him alive. They remove all the skin in that area as well as huge pieces of flesh, and throughout this whole process the son was alive and conscious. He would sometimes drift in and out of consciousness from the pain and loss of blood, I would assume. Sometimes he would appear lifeless, and other times he would react to what they were doing to him. It got to the point where they skinned the boy so much that you could literally see his organs moving, and they started removing them. For example, you could see his lungs inflate and deflate. It's honestly just horrifying to watch. The killers then take a knife and cut out the son's heart and hold it up to the camera. And the heart is still beating continuously. They then hold it up for a few seconds and the video then concludes. I really urge you to not go looking for this video because it's truly a sickening video that nobody should have ever seen. I've never seen anything this horrendous and inhumane in my life, and trust me, you don't want to either. There's something about hearing a son whimper and scream watching his dad get decapitated that really made me feel uneasy. It really can't be described or recreated. This is by far the worst cartel execution video out there, and rest in peace to this father and son. Nobody deserves to go this way. This is the gruesome case of Linda Spence Explained. Linda Spence was working as a financial advisor in Scotland and was reportedly involved in some shady dealings, accepting multiple deposits from elderly people for flats which were never built. In 2010, 27-year-old Linda Spence began to negotiate a deal for what she claimed was a valuable parcel of land near Stansted Airport, and as part of this deal, she produced some handmade bond certificates she claimed were issued by the government of Denmark. She attracted an investment of £80,000 from Colin Coates, a man with something of a reputation for being involved in criminal enterprise. While looking for further investors for her project, she traveled to the United States, where the fraudulent bonds caught the attention of the FBI, and she quickly left the country. Linda's house of cards was beginning to crumble around her when she returned to Scotland, and she ignored repeated attempts at contact from Mr. Coates, who was beginning to be concerned about his investment. Coates then took matters into his own hands by snatching Linda from the streets of Glasgow in April 2011. Coates hired 2 associates to watch Linda while she was held captive. Linda's disappearance was investigated by police, who quickly identified Coates as a person of interest based off their financial dealings. However, Coates denied any involvement in her disappearance, and the investigation appeared to stall. At this point, Linda's family has become aware of her sketchy dealings and maintained hope she had simply just fled the country. However, Coates was eventually betrayed by a witness who became concerned for his life due to his knowledge of the crime and Coates' constant threats to silence him. He then went to the police, naming Coates as her kidnapper, and gave the names of the associates who had guarded Linda during her ordeal. Upon being arrested, the 2 associates agreed to give evidence against Coates in return for reduced sentences. They reported that Linda was kept alive for over 2 weeks, during which time she was humiliated and tortured by Coates. She was tied to a chair and forced to sit in her own waste, had her thumb cut off, her kneecaps shattered with golf clubs, her feet completely crushed, and her hands completely burnt with an iron. Coates' associates both claimed they did not witness Linda's eventual murder, but believed that Colin Coates decapitated her and put her body in the boot of his car. In the days after Linda was believed to have been killed, Coates asked a friend to borrow his boat, but was turned down. Colin Coates was found guilty of Linda Spence's murder, but has also denied any involvement. Linda's body has still never been found, despite ongoing extensive searches by the police of Scotland. And they say this case will not be closed until Linda is found. This case is absolutely sickening, but Linda Spence did steal $80,000 from a man who was known to be involved in criminal activity. Not saying she deserved what happened to her at all, I'm just saying she messed with the wrong person and got the full consequence of it. Rest in peace to Linda Spence, and I hope her body is found soon.
It's shocking to think that there are actually people out there capable of doing something like this to another human being. This is the murder of 12-year-old Shanda Sharer, who was literally burned alive by a group of teenagers. In 1991, Shanda was attending Hazelwood Middle School in New Albany. In October that year, Shanda attended a school dance with fellow student Amanda Heverin. Amanda had recently been in a relationship with another girl, 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace, and on Melinda seeing her with Shanda, she became extremely jealous. Melinda began making threats, even telling other students that she would kill Shanda. On January 10th, 1992, Melinda enlisted the help of 3 friends, 17-year-old Laurie and 2 15-year-olds, Hope and Tony. They drove over to Shanda's dad's house where Shanda was staying and told her that Amanda wanted to see her and they'd give her a lift. She couldn't see Melinda hiding under a blanket in the back seat, so she went with them. As they started driving, Melinda jumped out from under the blanket with a knife and she threatened to slit Shanda's throat if she didn't confess to stealing Amanda from her. Shanda was actually too terrified to speak, and Melinda ordered the other girls to drive to a remote trash dump in the forest. They thought that she was just trying to scare Shanda, but they were dead wrong. Melinda dragged Shanda from the car and started to slam her knee into Shanda's face until she was covered in blood. Laurie then joined in with the attack while Hope and Tony stayed behind in the car. Melinda and Laurie then tried to slit Shanda's throat, but the knife wasn't sharp enough, so they stabbed her in the chest, strangled her, and then threw her into the trunk of the car thinking that she was dead. They then went back to Laurie's house to clean up, and they heard Shanda screaming from the trunk of the car. When they realised she was still alive, Laurie ran out with the knife and stabbed her a few more times. She then drove off with Melinda to carry on torturing Shanda, this time with a tyre iron. They then drove to a gas station and filled a 2-litre bottle with gasoline. Shanda was then wrapped in a blanket naked and set on fire. Shanda was actually still alive at this point, and the girls drove off while she burnt to death. Melinda then ordered them to go back a few minutes later, pour more gasoline on her, and make sure she was dead. The 4 girls then went and ate McDonald's breakfast and laughed about what they'd just done, comparing Shanda's burnt body to one of the sausages that they were eating. Later that day, Shanda's burnt remains were found, and Hope and Tony couldn't handle the guilt anymore, so they went to the police with their parents and spilled the whole story. All 4 girls were arrested and tried as adults. Tony was sentenced to 20 years but served only 9 and was released in 2000. Hope received 35 years but served only 14 and was released in 2006. Melinda and Laurie were both sentenced to 60 years but were released in 2018 and 2019.
This creepy doctor might be the worst pedophile in American history. Time to expose him. In 2010, Dr. Earl Bradley from Delaware was convicted on 471 charges of raping and molesting over 100 children. This story is actually really sad. So Earl was from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and after graduating from medical school, he practiced in Philadelphia, where I live, at the Jefferson Hospital. But this is where the story is so sad. So in 1994, he was accused of sexual misconduct dealing with a child. The hospital claimed to have investigated this claim, and they found there was nothing to the claim. Then in 1995, he was accused again of sexual misconduct with the child. Once again, the hospital tried to investigate, and they found that nothing had happened. They didn't believe the accusers. But after these allegations, Earl couldn't continue to work in Philadelphia, so he moved to Delaware. And that's where he opened this creepy clinic of his that's infamous now, known as Babies. And this is where the story takes an even darker turn. So, Babies was a pediatric clinic that Earl Bradley ran. It was decorated super creepily, looked like a carnival. It had all these child-themed decorations, and it looked really innocent. He had a giant Buzz Lightyear statue that greeted kids when they walked into the clinic. And the whole office had this weird decor like knights and fairy tale stuff. And his practice ran for a number of years in Delaware, but in 2004, his own sister Linda was forced to alert the State Medical Society because patients had complained to them about her own brother, Earl Bradley, inappropriately touching them during exams. But this was once again somehow brushed under the rug. Then in 2005, just a year later, more disturbing allegations were made against Earl Bradley when a nurse came forward and said she had seen him videotaping patients playing and that he regularly performed unnecessary vaginal exams on his young patients. And once again, this is just a picture of the decor of the building, super creepy. Another complaint was made in 2008 about this doctor, and finally an investigation was undertaken, and wow, did they find some disturbing shit. So when they looked through Dr. Earl Bradley's belongings, they discovered that he had been videotaping his rapes. He had over 13 hours of footage that was recorded on hidden cameras in his office and in his home. Footage of him sexually assaulting young children. After more investigating, they discovered that Earl Bradley had forced children as young as 3 months old to perform intercourse and oral sex on him. And like I said, this sicko videotaped all of it for his personal pleasure. After the arrest and these allegations were featured in the news and made public, lots of families came forward with sordid stories of the crooked doctor and what he did to their kids. Thankfully, this sick pedophile was sentenced to 165 plus years in prison, and this should make you all happy. His office was destroyed. This office had nothing but bad energy inside of it. And I'm glad that all of his company equipment is gone too. And history will only remember Dr. Earl Bradley as what he was, a sick pedophile.